Hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. No truer words have been spoken by C.S. Lewis, especially as we tackle the topic of being resilient. What is this resilient life? Resiliency is the choice to persevere, to dig deep, and to stay positive. Being resilient is about having an attitude that says life can be shitty with days that are good and days that are bad. But every day the sun rises in the morning. Resiliency requires honest acknowledgement of where you are. And in order to be resilient, you have to be your authentic, true self. And you have to be authentic not only with yourself, but also your current circumstances. The month of May is also ALS Awareness Month. As some of you know, ALS is near and dear to my heart, as my late father passed away from it nearly 10 years ago. When my dad was first diagnosed, he immediately jumped into action, wanting to learn what his options were, wanting to learn treatment plans. But unfortunately, with ALS, there is no cure yet. There are very minimal treatments, and there certainly were less 10 years ago. And he was told to just go live a quiet rest of his life. My dad did anything but that. He wanted to tell his story. He wanted to raise awareness. He wanted to raise funds for all persons living with ALS, or as we know them as PALS. ALS is a really tough disease because when diagnosed, your life expectancy is only 2 to 5 years. My own dad passed away after just 2. After being very involved in supporting our ALS community in the Nashville area, I pulled back. It was too painful during the grief process. But in this last year, I have reconnected with someone in the ALS community. Today, you will hear her story. She is a young, strong, powerful woman. She is a GSDer, and she embodies all of the attributes of be confident, inquisitive, imaginative, present, resilient, and influential. But the biggest one that stands out to me is her resiliency. She is taking on her ALS diagnosis with humor, social media, and taking all of us on a very transparent and vulnerable journey in hopes of raising money and awareness and sharing her story with the world. And so I'm so honored for you to hear her story here on the GSD Factor podcast. Now let's dive into the conversation with Brooke Eby. Welcome to the GSD Factor podcast. I'm your host, Misha Bleymaier-Farrish, and today I am so excited to have Brooke Eby on the call with us. Brooke and I are fellow Salesforce gurus. We've been in the tech space for a really long time, and I just love her story, and I'm so excited for you all to hear it today. Welcome, Brooke.
Thank you so much. I've never been called a guru before, so I'm going to hold on to that for a while.
You should. Brooke, tell everybody a little bit about you and your background and your amazing story.
Sure. My story was really not all that exciting until the last couple of years. So my first 29 years of life were like a Friday Night Lights episode, just like a cute group of friends, great family, like great upbringing. Went into the corporate world. It was kind of picture perfect. And then when I turned 29, I just started limping. Like it was out of nowhere. I really had no major health problems leading up to that. But I was walking to a work conference and I just started limping. And I had just moved from San Francisco to New York. And so like when you limp in New York, like people know it's not a place to move slowly. So people were like shoving me out of the way. They're like, "What are you doing?" And so a couple of my coworkers started noticing that I was limping too. And that kind of kicked off like a 4-year process of me trying to figure out what was going on with me. Spoiler, it ended up being ALS, which you may know as Lou Gehrig's disease. And it's crazy. You get such a subtle symptom and it leads to such a devastating diagnosis. Like at the age of 33, I was told you have ALS. You probably have like 2 to 5 years to live on average. You're going to go fully paralyzed at some point. You'll lose the ability to move, to talk, to swallow, and then eventually to breathe. And there's no cure today. So I went from like a perfectly normal 29 years to kind of a entire world flipping on its head in the last few. So I'm 35 now. I've been living with it for 2 years and have decided really just to share my story through silly social media videos mostly. I started doing that a couple months after being diagnosed, and here we are.
You are such an inspiration, and I love how you have taken this very jarring pivot in your life and said, okay, I am going to use this for good. I'm going to use this to amplify. I'm going to use this to raise awareness. And so kudos to you, friend, because I
Thank you.
think that, and I want you to share that story where you had that mind shift change, right? Because
Yeah.
I think there's so many people in this life that are, life is going, and then all of a sudden we're hit with something, and we have that moment to choose. And we powerfully choose to pivot gracefully or not to pivot gracefully. And I think that your story of that mind shift change would be really inspiring for our listeners to hear.
Yeah, I'm grateful that it happened in the way that it did because if it had just been me having to make the shift alone, like I don't know, who knows if I would have been able to, but so I got diagnosed in March of 2022 and I spent basically like 2 months just in bed with M&Ms. Like that was my coping strategy was I would read a book a day and I would eat probably a pound of M&Ms a day. That was like all I could do. And then I remember I would Google ALS and then I would close out the window really fast. Like I hated what I was seeing. And so I was just in this like survival mode of what like I have no idea how I'm going to get through this. And I should, as I mentioned, in my first 29 years, like very strong group of friends, very strong family. Thank God, because that was like the foundation I was able to make this shift off of. So 2 months into my diagnosis, I was a bridesmaid at one of my closest college friends' weddings. And like this was the type of wedding where, people were like dieting work beforehand. They were like getting their spray tan. It was like a college reunion. And I was showing up in a bridesmaid's dress that was like barely zipping because I had only been eating M&Ms and with a walker, the same walker as the bride's grandma. Like we walked in and we were like, nice tennis balls. Like it was insane. And so I walk in and I'm so uncomfortable, like physically and mentally. And a couple of my best friends were there. And I remember I turned to them and I'm like, we got to go home. Like, no one's going to notice if there's one bridesmaid missing. Like, please, let's just leave. And my friend Jackie turned to me and she was like, okay, what if like we just made this really fun instead of it being really embarrassing, like what if we just turned it into a fun time? Like either way you'll get a really good story out of it. It's going to be great. I was like, oh my God, kill me. So I just sort of like bared through it, and then a couple hours into the wedding the bride was like limboing under my walker, not the grandmother's but mine, and I was giving people walker rides all over the dance floor, and I remember being like, wait, this is so fun. Like it was me who was embarrassed, not, anyone putting that on me. And I found that because I was laughing through it and just dancing through it, like people were no one was uncomfortable, which was my biggest fear was like bringing down the vibe of the wedding, making people feel sad. Because prior to that, whenever I would tell someone my story, like I was ruining their day. They would just cry and then I would cry. And I was like, this sucks. I don't want to tell anyone ever again. So at that wedding, I was like, okay, maybe if I tell my story in a different way, like this could be a lot more fun for everyone. So after that wedding, and after seeing the videos of that wedding of all of us dancing with the walker, I was like, maybe I should, share this story on a bigger scale. And the one part of the story I rarely tell is I got COVID after that wedding for 4 weeks. It was like the worst COVID ever. And I had this horrible fever, and I decided to take a bubble bath. This is getting really in depth, but to try to break that fever. And I went into this like hallucinatory state where I opened up the notes app on my phone and I started writing down like funny things that I had experienced since being diagnosed. Like me talking about how the doctor saying I should gain weight and my sister being like, you're so lucky. And then us being like, ah, like it was just little moments like that that cracked me up. So I started writing them down and really didn't remember half of them the next week when I woke up out of my fever. But I showed them to that same friend, Jackie, and I was like, is there a there? Like, should I be posting this? And she was like, we're making you a TikTok tonight. So we came up with the username Limp Bruise Kit because we were, 90s kids listening to Limp Bizkit and I was limping and just started posting from there. And I think that like month of May just kind of like changed how I was thinking about attacking the disease back.
Your attitude and your approach to this is just so beautiful, right? Because I think whenever we are faced with those moments, it's like, okay, are we going to handle this? Which emotion are we going to handle it
Yeah,
with,
there's like
right?
two paths. And I
And
was like,
you
I'll take the tennis ball walker dancing path.
And I think that that's so beautiful, right? And I think what's happened is it's allowed you to get your story out there, share the story of ALS, amplify the message, right? Which there's a lot of research that still needs to happen. There's a lot of support that needs to happen, and you're doing that. And I think but you're doing it with humor and you're doing it with these amazing, memorable stories, whether it's your TikTok or your Instagram. And that's how I found you. And what I had shared with you is I lost my own father to ALS 10 years ago, and had not really, when my own father was diagnosed, he kind of was like, I'm going to attack this the same way, but he chose to amplify the story and do lots of golf tournaments to raise money and awareness. And he would take his permobile up and down all of the golf courses. And he chose to attack it in that way, and he wouldn't let it bring him down. And I think when you and I met, it's been really fun because it's also been very healing for me because I haven't really engaged with many people with ALS since dad passed. But seeing your resiliency and your confidence in how you're sharing your story and how you're sharing your message and doing it in this beautiful cloud of positivity and inspiration is really something to behold.
I love hearing that because there have been people who have talked about like their ALS stories in the last 10 years. Like there's always someone writing a book about their experience with ALS or sharing it now, through all the social channels. But I didn't really have the same, like a lot of people I think are very like inspirational, motivational, like it's like heavier. And that's just
Serious.
never how I've been able to talk. Like I've never been like a feelings type of person. I've never been like heavy. And so I think like the way I wanted to approach it was making it a lot more like fun in the weirdest
Yes.
sense, but also making it a little easier to watch. Because I think with TikTok, you have what, probably 3 seconds to capture someone's attention before they scroll to the next video. And like if I'm coming on there and being sad all the time, that's fine. But like I'm probably gonna get a lot of scroll aways because not everyone is ready to take on someone else's like heavy story. So I was like, I'm gonna try to just tackle it with my only defense mechanism, which is humor, and maybe it'll capture some attention. And hearing that, this is like one of the first times you've jumped back into the world of ALS, I think that's kind of a testament to people are willing to hear the heavy
Yes.
stuff, but like they want to do it in a digestible way. And so
Yes.
that's kind of what TikTok has given me, and Instagram is like, how can I not like sell my story, but like get people to like me, and therefore they'll listen to a story about ALS versus like just leading with the devastation that is ALS.
Right. Yes. Well, you are a trailblazer, as our
Sure.
Salesforce girl is trailblazing, and of course a GSD woman as well. And having been in the Salesforce ecosystem for 15 years that I have been, it's so fun to again how the universe brought our worlds together, right?
Yeah,
Between our tech background and our Salesforce background, and then ALS too. But I
crazy.
I just love your attitude and your inspiration. And I think what I really want to, as we pivot into this conversation, I want you to share with people how you have continued to beautifully and boldly maintain your independence. You're still traveling. So talk to us a little bit about that and how you are still taking on the world even in this Brooke Eby life with ALS.
Yeah, honestly, I think most of it is denial. I think denial, I always say like denial and Zoloft are my two crutches. Like those are the two things that help me the most because ALS changes your body so quickly, or it can. So I went from using no mobility aids to using a cane to using a walker to using a wheelchair, like within 6 months of my diagnosis. So it was really, really fast. And before that, I'd been so, so independent. Like I didn't even like dating anyone because I was like, I just want to be in my home alone. Like I don't want to hear anyone around me. Um, except for my dog. And so I think like being then put into this position where now I have to ask for help constantly. I demand help. Like it's not even like I can work without it. Um, it's been a psychiatrist told me the term, it's like rapid acceptance, I think is what he said. Like you have to rapidly accept changes coming to you. And so I think some of me is just not accepting some of it. So like the travel piece, I should travel with someone. Like that I should have someone with me. But I went on a work trip in December to New York where I didn't have enough time in advance to plan who would come with me. So I was like, I'm just going to try doing it alone and see what happens. And it worked out, luckily. I filmed the whole thing because leading up to that trip, I'm like, I wish someone else had filmed this start to finish so I could know what to expect. So I filmed the whole thing. Everything went off without a hitch, except I did get stuck between my hotel beds. They had like two beds really close together. It was crazy. I got on and off the train. I got from Penn Station to my hotel in my wheelchair with my suitcase. Like that should have been the hardest part. As soon as I get into my hotel room, I get stuck between two beds. And I had to call the front desk and be like, you probably never heard this one before. So prepare yourself. I need someone to come move the beds because I'm stuck between them. And they were like, no further questions. We'll be up in 5 minutes. And so like those are kind of the changes where I think like stubbornness is part of it, or and it's also just like denial. I'm like, I can't need help all the time. Like that's not where I am yet. So I think it's sort of kept me delusional enough to keep doing a lot of the things I was doing before at a slower pace, but still doing them.
Well, I think it's great, and I'm so glad that you shared that story because I was actually going to have you share that funny
Oh my
story because
gosh, yeah.
that one is one for the books for
My
sure.
chair was just like revving. I was like reverse and it was just like I'm like, oh no. What did I do? After all that, this is where I get stuck.
I think too, I think it's, those denials. It's, what, I'm going to persevere. I'm going to keep doing this as long as I possibly can do it. But I also think it is your confidence and your boldness and your resilience to say, this is not going to take me down without a fight. This is not going to take me down without humor in the mix. And so talk to us a little bit about how, Brooke's journey is, and how you're tying it in to, that confidence and that resilience in your life.
So I'm the youngest of three. My siblings are 6 and 8 years older than I am. And so I think I always was like striving for attention. Like attention was my number one goal. And I think the way you get that as the youngest who doesn't really understand what anyone's talking about is through jokes, like just humor. That's all you can do. So like my siblings would be talking about something and I'm like, I don't understand what they're saying, but I could probably find a joke to make and maybe get the attention back on me. It was like constantly a battle for attention. For me, like I don't think either of my siblings felt that way, but it was just like an internal battle. And so I think like doing that, you end up getting sort of a delusional level of confidence just because like you're so focused on getting the attention that you don't really care how you get it or why you get it. And I think that's like stuck with me. I've just always been super confident. Also, I always talk about my mom's style of mothering, which is like I'd be like, Mom, I have like a widow's peak. That's so weird. And she'd be like, that's a sign of beauty. Like everything was a sign of beauty. And so like I just grew up being like, I have every sign of beauty in that signs of beauty book that must exist somewhere. And so like I just grew up so confident that I think like that helps when you're putting your face on the internet because there's so many reasons not to, but I didn't even think about them. I was just like, I'm gonna put it on and see if people like it, and if they do, great. Like my sister, I remember being like, how do you sleep at night knowing your face is all over the internet? Like that, I would think about that so much. I'm like, huh, I've never really thought about it. And she was like, what? Like, how do you not think that way? I think like delusion, confidence, like whatever it is, I let myself not be embarrassed by anything I do until after I do it. Like that's kind of my strategy. Like I'm like, is this video embarrassing? I'm like, I don't care. I'm gonna post it. And if I get embarrassed after, great. But that who cares? Like it's already done. So just like I think that's my advice to people is like do the thing and then be embarrassed after the fact. Like don't pre-embarrass yourself, you know?
I love it because it's you being your true authentic self, right? And you're doing so unapologetically. And I think that it's this moment of this is me, right? This is me and with ALS, this is me with my humor. This is how this is how I choose to handle it. And I think that that's so important. I think, social media can be so powerful, but then also so not powerful and not positive. But I think
Yeah.
you putting yourself out there and saying this is me and this is my journey, and if it helps one person, then it's totally worth it. And I think that you're right. I think you're probably one of the youngest that has ALS, and I think your approach to this and sharing with the world and sharing your story is truly powerful and beautiful. And I think that sharing it through that lens of, you know what, this is shit, and here we
Yeah.
go, and this is how, and we're going to continue GSD, and we're going to continue to live out this life of laughter and beauty and seeing that glass half full, and I want to share it with the world in case it touches just that one person. So thank
Yeah.
you for that, because if you hadn't been doing your Instagram stories, I would never have found you.
Thank you. I know it's social media is crazy. I've been really lucky, honestly, with the response that I've gotten because it could have gone another way. Although I don't know like who would bully a girl with a terminal disease. I always think about that. I'm like, if I was just presenting myself without having ALS, like what kind of trolls I would get. Because the ones I get now are like fairly harmless compared to what other people get. So it's interesting, social media.
What has been the most surprising thing through your journey that you were like, okay, this is what I've heard about from it, this is what I'm expecting from ALS, but what has been like the most surprising thing for you through your journey?
I think honestly getting it was the biggest surprise because leading up to it, I really knew nothing about ALS prior to being diagnosed. I knew like Stephen Hawking and Lou Gehrig had it, but even with them, I'm like, I still don't know what it is. I just know he's in a wheelchair. Um, I didn't know enough that throughout my diagnosis period, again, I think it was a lot easier to be in denial because I remember like 2 years into the 4-year process, they gave me a genetic test for it. And I don't know if the neurologist explained about the genetic test or not, and I just wasn't listening or what, but they gave it to me, and you wait 4 weeks for the results, and it came back that I had no genetic markers. And my family celebrated as if we were out of the woods because we were like, oh, I didn't have any of the markers. I do not have it. Not realizing that like 90% of cases don't have genetic markers. So like I really only shaved off 10% of risk there. So I thought it was super, like I thought that was a yes no, but it turns out like there's no yes no in diagnosing ALS. Like 90% of cases are not genetic. It can affect anyone, anytime, like no rhyme or reason. And that's what happened with me. I also thought like I'm young and that can't happen. Like everything I knew or thought I knew about it was wrong. Like the genetic piece, the age, I thought it was super rare. I'm like, oh, lightning really struck, but it's like not that rare. It's just that people die really fast. So you don't know people living with it all at one time. Like it's just like the population is low because it's such a quick death sentence. It's not because it's a rare disease. I think the CDC still calls it a rare disease. We'll let them have their clarification or whatever those are called, like their buckets of how they qualify those. Is that the word I'm looking for? Classify those maybe is the better word. But to me, like a 1 in 300 chance over a lifetime is not rare.
So those that like you may be the first introduction to some of our listeners, right,
Yeah.
with ALS. So what organization do you recommend that they follow and maybe they want to support in this fight against ALS?
There's so many. It's so hard. There's like too many, probably. I think probably most diseases have this where like there's so everyone wants to make their own organization, so then things get diluted. So there's a bunch. Like I would say there's a research arm of things, and then there's like the patient care side of things. So if you're interested in more research, there's a bunch of ALS like labs and organizations that fund research. On the patient care side, there's organizations that will provide equipment like my little wheelchairs from Team Gleason. They do a lot of equipment. Like there's organizations on both sides, but I would say if they want to learn more about it, there's this new app. It like launched in the last 6 months. It's a website too. It's called Roon, Roon. And this
Okay.
isn't as much for like giving money to, but it's more just to learn. They recruited basically people from all of those organizations, people living with ALS, people caregiving to someone with ALS, and they interviewed us with question after question after, like they gave me a list of 100 questions and they were like, just go. And so they made little videos of all of us answering these questions because, like I said, when I got diagnosed, I would Google and then I would delete the Google. I didn't want to learn in the way that Google was showing it to me, which is like, you Google ALS and it's, the like recommended questions. It's like, how long till I die? I'm like, no, I don't want to see that. So like Roon has guides. So you can go in and be like, I just got diagnosed. What do I need to know today? And it takes you through that. So it's a lot more soft landing for someone who's just trying to learn more about it.
No, I think that's incredible. And I think too, I love where ALS support has come in the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Dad was diagnosed 12 years ago, passed 10 years ago. And the summer after he passed was that huge ice bucket challenge, right?
Yeah.
And, I know that brought a lot of awareness, but I think you really hit something on the head when you said there's that research around treatments and medications and things of that nature and eventually a cure. But then there's also that PALS world, right? A person living with ALS and that support of that person. And I think that that's really important. And so, to those listeners that are like wanting to learn more, I think Roon sounds like an amazing tool that is really filling a gap to your
Yeah.
point, it gives that soft landing of what you need in that moment. Because you're right, it is like drinking out of a fire hydrant when you first get that diagnosis. But then I think as we continue to amplify and we take action and we get shit done, it's a matter of, do you want to help on the research side, or do you want to help those persons living with ALS? And I
Yeah.
think that that's really important as well.
Yeah, I almost have trouble when people ask me like, where should I give money to? Because I'm like, it depends what you care most about right now. Because I've done
Yes.
fundraisers for ALS1 and ALS TDI, which are both research. And then there on the patient care side, there's like Team Gleason ALS Association. Like there are great organizations in each. And so it's hard to know like which one should I, do a big fundraiser for, but I've tried to just sort of divvy it up and hope for the best.
No, it's amazing. And I want you to share so I want you to talk about, so you were exercising your Be Influential muscle on your recent birthday. So share with us about your fundraiser, because you took Instagram by storm and you raised record amount of money in record amount of time. So share everybody with that, because I think that that's such an amazing story.
Yeah, I have no like fundraising advocacy background. Like I have no idea what I'm doing. So it actually all started last May. Last May was well, every May is ALS Awareness Month. But last May I was like, I need to do something for Awareness Month. Like I need to do something creative. So in May I decided to do a video a day, just answering questions from people. And it started sort of taking off. Like people were asking more and more questions. And I thought that was awesome because I'm like, these are people that probably have never heard of ALS and they're like genuinely asking questions. So I did 31 days of questions. And then on the last day, I was like, I need to figure out a way to like take action, like what's my ask in all of this? Like, was it just, awareness, or is there something more I should be asking for? So I decided to do an Instagram fundraiser on May 31st. And I was like, I'll keep it open for a month. We'll see what happens. And I think I set the goal to 25K, which I was like, no way. Like, we'll see what happens. And so I posted my 31st video of that month. I was like, here's what we're doing. Like, go to my Instagram. I have a fundraiser open. And I think before I went to bed that night, I think we hit 25K. And I was like, oh no, like what? I have no idea what I'm doing. It was just like, and I'm, in Salesforce sales, I'm like, I'm the worst forecaster on the planet. And so I raised it to 50K and we hit that in like a few days. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? So like, I think people had just like started donating and then started sharing, and it just like kind of got out of control, and it was awesome. But I'm like, wow, I didn't prepare for it. So I was like, how do I thank all these people? What do I do? And so we got to like 70 something K, and then it kind of slowed down, and I'm like, phew, like, okay, pressure's off again. Now I can just close it. And then I get a DM, which I thought was like a Finsta. I thought it was a fake, being like, if you get to 100K, I'll match it. And I was like, who are you, Mackenzie Bezos? Like, I don't believe you. And so they were like, well, let's get on a call. Like, we are completely serious. So I got on a call with these people. I like to keep it anonymous. We called them KJ. So I got on a call with them and they were like, we're dead serious, like 100K and we'll match. So I posted that video being like, guys, this anonymous donor is offering 100K. Like, we got to get there. We got there in like 24 hours. So it just like, it taught me more and more about fundraising, where I'm like, people are excited to hit a goal. So we ended up I closed that fundraiser. I think with the match, we ended up at like 230K, which again, 10 times what I was expecting. And I kind of halted after that because I'm like, I don't want people to get fatigued. Like, I don't want people to think it's just about money here. Like, obviously that is what's going to drive the cure, but let's take a pause. And so then when my birthday rolled around, I was trying to think of fun ways to do a fundraiser that weren't just like donate again, like let's just repeat what we did in May. And so I decided to come up with something called a $5 challenge. I don't know if I came up with it actually. I'm sure it was in my subconscious from someone else somewhere, but I just said, everyone, if you can donate $5, and let's see like what we can get to. And so I think it helped people me giving the amount because like on those Instagram fundraisers or like meal trains, I never know how much to give. So I like search what other people have given and I try to give like around what other people have given. I assume that's what everyone does because you're like, I don't want to seem cheap, but I don't want to, blow out my bank account just like for the sake of looks. So I always scroll through. And so I was like, if I just tell everyone to do $5, like how easy is that? It's like a couple of clicks. And I think we ended up at like 25, 26K on like within 24 hours of the 24 hours of my birthday, which was awesome. So now it's like me just trying to think about other fun ways to fundraise. And I think the $5 one is a good one for the future because again, it takes the pressure off. It makes it like a fun little game.
It does. And I mean, think about that for a minute, right? You raised 25 grand in 24 hours
Crazy.
and probably, with, you telling people $5, I mean, you're talking 5,000 people are
Yeah.
now aware, they're educated, they're donating and they're actively donating. And so it's such a beautiful story of influence. And also I love the creativity behind it, right? It's, how can you get the story out there and amplify in this new and fun way? And I think that, because you are bringing your lens to this of humor and vulnerability and transparency, I think people love that, and I think they really connect with you, and they feel that connection with you and your story and following along with you. And I think that you taking all of us along this journey, thank you, because it is fun to be able to walk this with you. It's not a fun diagnosis by any means, but your perspective is really commendable, and you're someone that I can point others to and say Brooke is doing this the right way. And it's actually been really meaningful for me. I've been able to show some of your videos to my daughter because she never got to meet her Papa Teddy, and so I'm able to say like, look, Brooke is still traveling and she works at Salesforce, because my daughter's always loved all the Salesforce characters. She has all of the stuffies from
Yeah.
Dreamforce and all the conferences. And so, Miss Brooke is the Salesforce guru. But I'm able to kind of give her a lens into like, this is what your grandfather went through.
Yeah.
And so thank you for that, because I think you don't fully appreciate or understand all the impacts that you're doing and making, but you are truly making that impact in so many different lives and in different ways. And we are so grateful that you continue to share your story and continue to amplify.
Thank you so much. It's interesting. I'm like, to me, it's just like recording what I did that day. But I think over time, it's really interesting for people to see like the changes. Like even in my last couple of videos, people are like, did your core get weaker? Like you're slouching more. And I'm like, it did. I'm glad thank you for pointing that out, Mom. Like my mom's always the one that's like, sit up straight. But yeah, like people are gonna see how this all happens. At least in my story, because everyone's is fairly different.
Yes. Well, Brooke, where's the best place that people can follow you and connect with you and continue to follow along on your amazing journey?
Yeah, so I named my socials. The handle is Limp Bruise Kit. I don't know how the age range of like your demographic of listeners, but hopefully there's some Limp Bizkit fans in there. I wouldn't even call myself a fan. It's hard to be a fan of Limp Bizkit, but people are aware of who Limp Bizkit is. So it's Limp Bruise Kit, LimpBroozKit, and I'm pretty much that on all socials.
Amazing. And we will definitely put it in the show notes. All right. So final question for you. What is Brooke powerfully choosing here in 2024?
That's so hard. I think I don't want to say like positivity because I think that's too hard to achieve. But like I heard someone once say, like, don't try to be happy every day, but like try to be content with your life. And I think that's like a really soothing message because when someone's like, let's be happy every day, you feel like you're not doing enough. But like, am I content with my day to day? Like, yes. Even if I'm like sitting on the couch all day with my pets, like that's fine. Um, so maybe it's just like content or like peace in 2024.
I love that. Powerfully choosing contentment and
Yeah.
peace. Well, Brooke, thank you so much. It has been such an honor having you on the podcast.
Oh
And
my gosh, thank you.
yes. And for those of you, be sure to go out and follow Brooke across all the socials. Continue to amplify that message of confidence and resiliency and influence. Brooke, we're so proud of you. We're definitely cheering you on. For those that you know and those people that you don't know, but you're being an inspiration to all of us. So thank you so much. Thank you to our GSD Factor podcast listeners for joining us today. And don't forget to get shit done.
Thanks for listening to the GSD Factor podcast. If you liked this episode, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, where you can also find previous episodes. Let's also connect on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you're looking for more information on the GSD Factor, visit us at gsdfactor.com. And always remember to GSD, get shit done.